Jack Holloway was having a terrible day even before aliens commandeered his ship. The cargo of synthetic coffee beans he was hauling to Mars had started to ferment something the manufacturer had assured him was technically impossible, and the resulting fumes had given him a headache that felt like someone was playing the drums inside his skull, using his eyeballs as drumsticks. "Computer, how long until we reach Mars?" Jack groaned, slouching further into his captain's chair, a term he used generously for what was essentially an old car seat bolted to the floor of the cockpit. "Approximately 37 hours, Captain," replied the ship's AI in that perpetually cheerful voice that made Jack want to reprogram it with a baseball bat. "And how much longer until these coffee beans stop smelling like a fraternity bathroom?" "That query does not compute, Captain." "Yeah, I figured as much," Jack muttered, taking another swig from his flask of what he claimed was medicinal whiskey. Jack Holloway had never planned to be a cargo pilot. 10 years ago, he'd been on the fast track at NASA, lined up for the first manned mission to Europa. Then came what he now referred to as the incident involving the NASA director's daughter, 3 penguins from the Houston Zoo, and what was, in Jack's defense, a perfectly reasonable amount of tequila for a Tuesday night. His promising career had evaporated faster than water in a vacuum. Now he was just another space trucker, hauling goods between Earth and the colonies for whoever would pay him enough to keep his rust bucket flying. The Cornelia named after an ex-girlfriend who, like the ship, was beautiful but temperamental and prone to breaking down at the worst possible moments wasn't much, but she was his. It was at that precise moment, while contemplating whether his life could possibly get any worse, that his ship's proximity alarms began blaring. "Unidentified vessel approaching on intercept course," announced the computer, still sounding irritatingly cheerful about their imminent doom. "Size and configuration?" Jack asked, sitting up straight for the first time in hours. "Unknown. The vessel does not match any known human designs." Jack laughed bitterly. "Very funny. Override joke protocols and give me a reel." He stopped mid-sentence as the view outside his cockpit window shifted. Where there had been nothing but stars a moment before, there was now a massive ship that looked like someone had taken every sci-fi movie ever made, thrown them in a blender, and built whatever came out. It was all sleek angles and glowing bits, with proportions that made Jack's brain hurt. "Holy shh." Before he could finish his eloquent observation, his ship shuddered. A beam of light, actual, honest-to-God tractor beam light, enveloped the Cornelia. "We are being pulled toward the unidentified vessel," the computer helpfully informed him. "No kidding," Jack replied, frantically hitting buttons on his console. Nothing responded. It was as if his ship had suddenly decided to become a very expensive paperweight. A voice crackled through his communications system. It spoke perfect English, but with an accent Jack couldn't place, slightly musical, and with too many consonants. "Human vessel, you have been selected for an urgent diplomatic mission. Resistance is both futile and unnecessary. Please prepare for boarding." Jack glanced down at his stained jumpsuit, the empty whiskey flask on his console, and the warning light indicating that the cargo of synthetic coffee beans was now at risk of combustion. "Computer," he said with resignation, "I think we're about to represent humanity to aliens. How do I look?" "You have approximately 73 hours before your current attire becomes sentient due to accumulated bacteria, Captain." "Perfect," Jack sighed. "Just perfect." As it turned out, humanity had been on the galactic stage for precisely 27 days, ever since a deep space probe had accidentally transmitted the entire catalog of Earth's reality TV shows to what was apparently a very populated pig sector of the galaxy. The resulting diplomatic crisis had led the Galactic Council, yes, there was actually something called the Galactic Council, to seek out a human representative. And now, through what Jack could only assume was the universe's idea of a cosmic joke, that representative was him. "Let me get this straight," Jack said to the blue-skinned alien, who had introduced herself as Ambassador Zeal of the Arcturian Confederation. "Out of 8 billion humans, you picked me?" Zeal blinked her 4 eyes in what might have been amusement. "The selection was random, based on proximity to our patrol route. The Council believes in giving all species equal opportunity for representation." That's democratic of you, Jack replied, trying not to stare at the tentacles that occasionally emerged from what he assumed was Zeal's sleeve. Indeed. Now we must hurry. The Galactic Council is already in session, and the matter concerning humanity is most urgent. What matter is that exactly? Zeal's expression shifted to something unreadable. The Voraxians have filed a formal challenge against Earth's admission to the galactic community. They believe humans are too primitive and volatile to join interstellar society. And what happens if we fail this challenge? Then Earth will be placed under a Class 3 quarantine for the next 1,000 years, prohibited from all interstellar travel and communication. Jack felt his headache intensify. So no pressure then. As the alien ship, which he learned was called something unpronounceable, that roughly translated to diplomatic vessel, that occasionally violates sovereignty when necessary, carried him toward the Galactic Council headquarters. Jack couldn't help but wonder if those fermented coffee beans might have caused him to hallucinate the entire situation. But the tentacled bartender serving him something that smelled like gasoline and tasted like blueberry mouthwash suggested otherwise. Jack was, for better or worse, about to become humanity's first galactic diplomat. And he hadn't even packed a clean shirt. The Galactic Council headquarters looked exactly how Jack had always imagined an alien government building would look, impossibly large, defying several laws of physics, and with far too many lights that served no apparent purpose. It hung in space like a giant cosmic snowflake made of metal and glass, rotating slowly around a star that was just the right shade of purple to make Jack question his sanity once again. Pretty, he commented as their shuttle approached. The Council Nexus was designed by the harmonious collective of architectural telepaths, Zeal informed him. It is said that merely looking upon it can cure certain forms of existential dread. Is that why I suddenly feel like my tax problems aren't so bad? Zeal's translator must have struggled with that one, because she simply blinked her 4 eyes in sequence and guided him toward the docking bay. The interior of the Nexus was a riot of alien life forms. Jack saw creatures that resembled walking chandeliers, floating gas clouds with eyes, and what appeared to be sentient puddles of liquid metal. Each species seemed to have its own unique way of moving, communicating, and presumably judging him as he walked past in his stained jumpsuit. The council chamber is this way, Zeal said, leading him down a corridor that kept changing colors in response to their footsteps. Try not to make direct eye contact with the psionic delegations. They consider it an invitation to browse your memories. Thanks for the heads up, Jack muttered, now consciously trying to forget every embarrassing thing he'd ever done, which, of course, only made him remember them more vividly. The council chamber itself resembled a massive amphitheater, with hundreds of platforms floating at different heights, each occupied by representatives of various alien species. At the center was a circular platform where a being that appeared to be made entirely of shifting light stood. That is High Arbiter Luminex, Zeal whispered. They will preside over your challenge. And where are these Voraxians I'm supposed to be worried about? As if on cue, a commotion erupted from one of the higher platforms. A group of aliens that looked like the unholy offspring of a crocodile and a bodybuilder pushed their way to the front. Their scales gleamed metallic purple under the chamber's lights, and their 4 arms rippled with muscles that would make a professional wrestler question their life choices. Those, Zeal said unnecessarily, are the Voraxians. Fantastic, Jack sighed. And I left my crocodile wrestling equipment on my ship. The High Arbiter's voice filled the chamber without seeming to get any louder, a neat trick Jack would have appreciated learning for his next bar argument. The Council recognizes Ambassador Zeal of the Arcturian Confederation and the human representative. Zeal nudged Jack forward onto a platform that detached from the floor and floated toward the center of the chamber. Jack tried very hard not to look down at the seemingly bottomless depths below. Representatives of Earth, the High Arbiter continued, the Voraxian Empire has invoked the right of challenge regarding your species' admission to the galactic community. Do you understand the significance of this? Jack glanced at Zeal, who nodded encouragingly. Not even slightly, he replied honestly, but I'm a quick learner. A ripple of what might have been laughter or possibly indigestion went through the assembled delegates. The largest of the Voraxians stepped forward on their platform. "Hi, Arbiter. I am Grand Marshal Craxx of the Voraxian Empire. We have studied the transmissions from Earth and find their species woefully unprepared for galactic citizenship. They are violent, chaotic, and their reality television programming alone should disqualify them on grounds of cultural contamination." Jack couldn't really argue with that last point. "The Voraxians propose a challenge of worthiness," Craxx continued. "Let this human prove his species deserves a place among the stars by facing our champion in a series of tests." "And if I refuse?" Jack asked. "Then Earth is automatically quarantined," Zeal whispered. "No appeal possible for 1,000 years." Jack sighed. "Right, of course." The High Arbiter's light form shifted to a slightly more orange hue. "The challenge has been properly invoked. Human representative, do you accept?" Jack looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien species watching him. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he realized that he was making a decision that would affect the entire future of humanity. The responsible thing would be to request time to consult with actual Earth governments, to form a committee, to do anything but what he was about to do. "Sure," he said with a shrug. "Why not? I didn't have any plans this weekend anyway." And just like that, Jack Holloway, washed-up astronaut, cargo pilot, and owner of what was probably now a ship full of exploded coffee beans, became Earth's champion in a contest that would determine humanity's galactic fate. The Voraxian platform lowered to the same level as Jack's. Grand Marshal Craxx was even more intimidating up close, standing nearly 8 feet tall with a jaw that looked capable of biting through the hull of Jack's ship. "The challenge will consist of 3 tests," Craxx announced. "Physical prowess, mental acuity, and spiritual resilience. Our champion Gron awaits you in the proving grounds." With that, the Voraxian platform retreated, and Jack's platform began moving toward an exit on the far side of the chamber. "Did I just agree to fight an alien crocodile?" Jack asked Zeal as they floated away from the council. "Not necessarily fight," Zeal replied. "The tests vary depending on the challenger's discretion." "That's not as reassuring as you think it is." As they exited the chamber, Jack caught sight of the Voraxian champion waiting in the corridor beyond. Gron made Grand Marshal Craxx look like a friendly gecko. The alien champion stood 9 feet tall, with arms like tree trunks and a smile that contained far too many teeth arranged in far too many rows. "Human," Gron rumbled in a voice that sounded like gravel in a blender. "I look forward to proving your species' inferiority." Jack stared up at the massive alien and felt a hysterical laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside him. "You know what?" he said. "I'm starting to miss those fermented coffee beans." Following his introduction to Gron and experience, Jack ranked slightly below having a root canal and pant slightly above being audited by the IRS. He was escorted to what Zeal called preparatory quarters, but what Jack would have described as a very nice prison cell. The room was comfortable enough with its self-adjusting furniture and walls that changed color based on his mood, currently a very stressed-out shade of green. But the door locked from the outside, which didn't exactly scream honored guest. "You have 6 hours to prepare for the first test," Zeal informed him. "I've arranged for an advisor to assist you. Please tell me it's someone who specializes in running away from 9-foot crocodile people," Jack said as he collapsed onto what he hoped was a bed, and not some kind of alien specimen collection device. "Even better," Zeal replied. "Nyx is a former cultural attaché who has extensive experience with the Voraxians." As if summoned by her name, the door slid open to admit what appeared to be a humanoid cat with iridescent fur and an expression that suggested she had better things to do. "This is the human champion?" Nyx asked, looking Jack up and down with obvious disappointment. "I assumed there had been a mistake in the translation." "Nice to meet you too," Jack muttered. Zeal made a gesture that might have been the alien equivalent of a shrug. He was the closest representative available. Proximity is rarely an indicator of quality. Nyx replied, circling Jack as if inspecting a particularly unimpressive specimen. "But I suppose we must work with what we have." "I'm standing right here," Jack pointed out. Yes, Nix agreed. That appears to be one of your few accomplishments today. Jack decided he might actually prefer Gron's company. Zeal excused herself to attend to diplomatic necessities, leaving Jack alone with his new advisor. Nix immediately began accessing a holographic display that projected from a device on her wrist. The Voraxians have selected 3 traditional challenges, she explained without preamble. The first is the Gauntlet of QR, a hazardous obstacle course designed to test physical adaptability. Let me guess, Jack said. It's designed for beings with 4 arms and super strength. Naturally, Nix replied. The Voraxians always choose tests that favor their physiology. It's why they've successfully challenged 17 species into quarantine over the past century. 17? And the Council just lets this happen? The right of challenge is one of the oldest statutes in galactic law, Nix explained with the air of a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. It predates even the formation of the Council itself. Great. So how do I beat an obstacle course designed for someone twice my size with twice as many limbs? For the first time, Nix's expression shifted into something that might have been respect or possibly indigestion. It was hard to read feline facial expressions. You don't, she said. At least not by playing according to their rules. The gauntlet has no specific requirements except reaching the end. How you do so is entirely up to you. Jack felt a smile spreading across his face. So cheating is allowed? It's not cheating if there's no rule against it, Nix corrected. The Voraxians rely on intimidation and the assumption that others will try to beat them at their own game. What they don't expect is human ingenuity, Jack finished. Or as we like to call it, making stuff up as we go along. 6 hours later, Jack stood at the entrance to the Gauntlet of Quar, a sprawling obstacle course that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated contestants on a very personal level. Various platforms hovered over pools of something that bubbled ominously. Walls of spikes extended and retracted in patterns that seemed deliberately unpredictable. And obstacle arms swung with enough force to knock a human into next week. Gron stood beside him, looking supremely confident in his physical superiority. Try not to die too quickly, human, the Voraxian champion said. It's embarrassing when challenges end in the first event. I'll do my best to provide entertainment, Jack replied with a smile that he hoped conveyed confidence rather than the abject terror he was actually feeling. The gauntlet was being broadcast to the entire council, with various delegates watching from floating platforms above the course. Jack spotted Zeal among them, looking concerned. A tone sounded, and the race began. Gron immediately leapt forward, his powerful legs carrying him across gaps that would have been impossible for Jack to jump. His forearms allowed him to swing from obstacles with ease while simultaneously batting away moving barriers. Jack, meanwhile, took a completely different approach. Rather than attempting the first set of platforms, he slid under them, using the maintenance catwalks that the Voraxians had clearly never considered as part of the course. Where Gron climbed over walls of spikes, Jack found service ducts designed for the small maintenance drones that kept the gauntlet functioning. What is the human doing? He heard one of the council delegates ask in confusion. I believe it's called improvising, another replied. By the halfway point, Gron was still ahead, but was showing signs of confusion as Jack kept appearing in places he shouldn't have been able to reach. The Voraxian champion had clearly anticipated a straight race where his superior physiology would guarantee victory. Instead, he found himself competing against someone who treated the entire course as a suggestion rather than a requirement. The final obstacle was a climbing wall that extended at least 50 feet upward, with handholds that retracted randomly, perfect for someone with 4 strong arms and minimal regard for safety. Gron was already a third of the way up when Jack reached the base of the wall. Instead of following, Jack examined the wall's foundation and spotted what he was looking for: a maintenance access panel. 30 seconds of tinkering later, thank you NASA training, he was inside the wall's control system, riding a service elevator straight to the top. He emerged just as Gron pulled himself over the edge, panting with exertion. The Voraxian champion stared in disbelief as Jack casually dusted off his hands. How did you? "Oh, I took the elevator," Jack replied cheerfully. "You know, humans aren't big on unnecessary physical exertion. We invented the remote control so we wouldn't have to walk 5 feet to change the TV channel." The crowd of delegates erupted in a mixture of laughter, cheers, and what might have been outraged squawking from the Voraxian section. Grand Marshal Krax stormed forward. "This is an outrage. The human clearly cheated." The High Arbiter's light form shimmered thoughtfully. "Our review indicates no violation of the Gauntlet's parameters. The human reached the end point using the infrastructure of the course itself. The challenge is valid." Jack couldn't help but grin at Gron, whose reptilian features had darkened to an interesting shade of purple. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm sure the mental acuity test will be more your speed." As it turned out, Jack had overestimated the Voraxian concept of mental acuity. The second test involved solving a series of logic puzzles that, while complex, were fundamentally based on Voraxian cultural assumptions that Jack, being completely ignorant of Voraxian culture, was free to ignore. Where Gron approached each puzzle with rigid adherence to traditional methods, Jack applied what he called his have-you-tried-hitting-it approach to problem-solving. By the end of the second test, the score was tied at 1 victory each, with the Voraxians looking considerably less confident than they had at the beginning. As Jack was escorted back to his quarters to prepare for the final challenge, he noticed something he hadn't expected. The other species were watching him with what appeared to be hope. Jack's brief moment of triumph was short-lived. As Nyx escorted him back to his preparation chamber, he noticed her normally impassive expression had shifted to something resembling concern. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I thought we were doing pretty well so far." "Too well," Nyx replied, checking the corridor to ensure they weren't being overheard. "The Voraxians don't like losing, especially not to species they consider inferior. So they're sore losers. I've dealt with those before." "You don't understand," Nyx hissed. "They won't allow themselves to be defeated in front of the Council. Not by humans." Before Jack could ask what she meant, the door to his chamber slid open, revealing a figure already waiting inside. Unlike most of the aliens he'd encountered so far, this one appeared almost humanoid, with delicate features and skin that seemed to shimmer with an internal light. "This is Kella," Nyx said, "a xenobiologist who has been studying humans. She has information you need to hear." Jack looked between the two aliens. "Is this an intervention? Because I promised I was going to shower before the next challenge." Neither of them laughed. Kella stepped forward, her movements fluid like water. "Your species is in grave danger," she said without preamble. "The Voraxians have altered the final challenge." "They can do that?" Jack asked. "Not officially," Nyx replied. "But the final challenge, spiritual resilience, is traditionally open to interpretation by the challenging species. And let me guess, their interpretation involves me being dead by the end of it." Kella nodded. "The Voraxians have modified the chamber of reflection to induce hallucinations specifically calibrated to human brain chemistry. The visions will be traumatic." "How traumatic are we talking about here?" Jack asked, though he was pretty sure he already knew the answer. "Previous subjects exposed to similar calibrations experienced complete psychological breakdown," Kella said. "Some never recovered." Jack sat down heavily on his bed. "So they're going to drive me insane because I beat their champion in a glorified obstacle course?" "Not just that," Nyx added. "The Voraxian Emperor himself has taken notice of your performance. It seems your comment to Gron after the first challenge was interpreted as a grave insult in their culture." Jack frowned. "What comment?" "About the mental acuity test being more his speed. In Voraxian culture, implying someone is mentally superior rather than physically superior is like," Nyx searched for an appropriate human comparison, "like suggesting someone's mother has questionable moral standards." "Great," Jack sighed. "So I've insulted their champion, embarrassed their species, and now their emperor is mad at me. Any other good news?" Kella and Nyx exchanged glances. "There's more," Kella said. "The stake of this challenge isn't just Earth's quarantine status. If you lose, the Voraxians will claim provisional authority over Earth's solar system. Your people will essentially become a client species of the Voraxian Empire. You mean slaves, Jack said flatly. They prefer the term protected asset, Nix replied. But yes, effectively slaves. Jack stood up and paced the room. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? Because it wasn't true before, Kella explained. The Voraxians only elevated the stakes after you tied the score. They're invoking an ancient provision of the challenge code that hasn't been used in 7 millennia. And the Council is just okay with this? The Council is divided, Nix said. Many species fear the Voraxians. Others see humans as a potential threat based on your entertainment broadcasts. Some are simply waiting to see what happens. So I'm on my own. Not entirely, Kella said, touching a band on her wrist. A holographic display appeared, showing schematics for what appeared to be a small device. This is a neural stabilizer. It won't prevent the hallucinations entirely, but it should help you distinguish between reality and the induced visions. Where did you get this? Jack asked, examining the schematic. I designed it, Kella replied. My species has been studying Voraxian technology for centuries. We have our own reasons for wanting to see them humbled. And why are you helping me specifically? Kella's shimmering skin glowed slightly brighter. Because my analysis of human transmissions suggests your species, for all its flaws, values freedom above all else. The galaxy does not need another race subjugated by Voraxian protection. Before Jack could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. They're moving up the schedule, Nix said, her ears flattening against her head. We have less time than I thought. Kella quickly pressed a small device into Jack's hand. Place this behind your ear. It won't be detectable to their scanners. As Jack applied the neural stabilizer, he felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. This was no longer about representing humanity or even about winning a contest. It was about survival. One more thing, Kella said as the door to his chamber slid open, revealing a Voraxian guard. After the Chamber of Reflection, there's traditionally a final physical challenge, a pursuit through the station. The Voraxians will expect you to run. And I'm guessing Gron is a lot faster than me, Jack said. Kella's expression was unreadable. Just remember, Voraxians are built for short bursts of speed, not endurance. They evolved as ambush predators. Before she could say more, the Voraxian guard stepped into the room. The final challenge awaits, human, the guard rumbled. The Emperor himself will be observing. As Jack was escorted away, he caught a final glimpse of Nix and Kella. Both looked worried, which did nothing to improve his own confidence. The Chamber of Reflection turned out to be a featureless white room with a single chair in the center. As doors sealed behind him, Jack felt the neural stabilizer behind his ear grow slightly warm. Human Jack Holloway, an unseen voice announced. You will now face the challenge of spiritual resilience. Reflect upon your existence and find truth within yourself. That's pretty vague, Jack called out. Any specific type of truth I should be looking for? No answer came. Instead, the white walls around him began to shift and ripple like water. Colors swirled across the surfaces, gradually forming into shapes and scenes from Jack's own memories, but twisted, darker. He saw the failed Europa mission that ended his NASA career, but now with catastrophic consequences. The penguins from the incident transformed into monstrous creatures. His abandoned dreams morphed into accusatory apparitions. The visions pulled at his mind, trying to drag him into despair. Without Kella's device, Jack suspected he would have already been overwhelmed. Instead, he felt a strange detachment, aware of the hallucinations, but able to recognize them as artificial. Nice try, he muttered, focusing on his breathing the way an old flight instructor had taught him. But I've had hangovers that were more psychologically damaging than this. The room's frustration was almost palpable. The visions intensified, becoming more personal, more painful. Jack saw Earth under Voraxian control, humans in chains, his own failures extrapolated into the extinction of his species. but the neural stabilizer held. For 3 hours, Jack endured the chamber's increasingly desperate attempts to break his spirit. When the doors finally opened, he was still seated calmly in the chair, though his knuckles were white from gripping the armrests. The assembled council delegates murmured in shock. No one had expected the human to emerge with his sanity intact. Grand Marshal Krax looked furious. Impossible. No primitive species could withstand the chamber's full intensity. Jack shrugged as he stood up, legs slightly wobbly but mind clear. What can I say? Humans watch reality TV for entertainment. After that, your hallucinations are basically a Tuesday night. The High Arbiter's light form pulsed with what might have been amusement. The human has passed the challenge of spiritual resilience. As tradition dictates, only the pursuit remains. Emperor Varaxian himself now moved forward on his floating platform, an even larger, more intimidating version of his species, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. The human's unexpected resilience changes nothing, the Emperor declared. The pursuit will determine the final outcome. Champion Gron will pursue human Jack through the designated course. If the human is caught before reaching the sanctuary point, Earth belongs to the Varaxian Empire. Jack stared up at the massive alien ruler and felt a strange calm replace his fear. He glanced around the chamber and noticed Kella among the observers, giving him an almost imperceptible nod. I accept the challenge, Jack said, louder than necessary. Let's get this over with. The pursuit course turned out to be a sprawling section of the station that had been cleared of regular traffic. Holographic markers designated the path Jack was to follow, with the sanctuary point a glowing blue platform visible in the distance. Approximately 2 miles away through a maze of corridors, open spaces, and what appeared to be some kind of alien shopping mall. Jack stood at the starting position, painfully aware of Gron stretching his massive muscles nearby. The Varaxian champion looked even more intimidating now, having discarded his ceremonial armor for a lightweight outfit that emphasized his powerful physique. You'll have a 1-minute head start, Grand Marshal Krax informed Jack with obvious satisfaction. After that, Champion Gron will pursue. If he touches you before you reach Sanctuary, you lose. Just touches me? Jack asked. Not say tears me limb from limb? That would be against council regulations, Krax replied, though his tone suggested he found those regulations disappointing. Jack glanced up at the observation platforms where various council members floated, watching the proceedings with interest. He spotted Zeal looking concerned, Nyx calculating something on a holographic display, and Kella giving him a meaningful look that he hoped meant remember what I told you. The High Arbiter's voice resonated through the space. The final challenge will now commence. May the outcome reflect the true worth of both participants. A tone sounded, and Jack took off running down the marked path. His years of NASA training had kept him in decent shape, despite his current career's emphasis on sitting for long periods, and he set a steady pace, trying to put as much distance between himself and Gron as possible during his head start. The course twisted through the station, taking him through corridors where alien spectators lined the walls, some cheering, others watching in silence. Jack kept his breathing controlled, focusing on efficiency rather than speed. When the minute was up, a second tone sounded. From behind him, Jack heard what could only be described as the sound of a very large, very motivated predator beginning his pursuit. Gron moved faster than Jack had anticipated. Within the first stretch, the Varaxian had already closed a third of the gap between them. Jack pushed himself harder, but it was obvious that in a straight race, he would be caught long before reaching Sanctuary. It's time for Plan B. As he entered a large, open atrium filled with floating platforms, Jack veered off the marked path, leaping onto a service ladder that led to a higher level. The crowd gasped at this apparent deviation, but there was no rule stating he had to follow the markers, only that he had to reach the sanctuary point. Gron, momentarily confused by this tactic, soon adjusted his course and followed, his powerful arms making quick work of the ladder. Jack was already moving again, crossing a series of maintenance catwalks that crisscrossed the upper level of the atrium. You cannot escape, human, Gron roared, his voice echoing through the space. Your pathetic endurance is no match for Voraxian might. Jack didn't waste breath responding. Instead, he analyzed the layout ahead of him, looking for bottlenecks and opportunities. The course next led through what appeared to be a food court filled with various alien cuisines, the air thick with exotic smells. As he sprinted through, Jack grabbed a container of something gelatinous from a startled vendor and, without breaking stride, emptied it onto the floor behind him. When Gron followed seconds later, his clawed feet lost traction on the slippery substance, sending him crashing into a display of what looked like sentient broccoli. The delay bought Jack precious seconds, but not enough. Gron recovered quickly, his rage visibly mounting as he resumed the chase with renewed determination. They were now approximately halfway to the sanctuary point, and Jack could feel his advantage dwindling. His legs burned, his lungs heaved, and sweat soaked his jumpsuit. Gron, meanwhile, seemed barely winded, his powerful strides eating up the distance between them. As they entered a long, straight corridor lined with spectators, Jack knew he wouldn't make it to the end before being caught. Gron was now less than 30 feet behind him and closing rapidly. It was time for Plan C, the real plan all along. Jack stopped. The sudden halt was so unexpected that Gron actually ran past him before skidding to a stop, confusion evident on his reptilian features. "What are you doing, human?" the Voraxian demanded. "Why have you stopped running?" Jack, hands on his knees, looked up with a grin despite his heaving breaths. "Why would I keep running when I know you'll catch me?" The spectators fell silent, watching the bizarre tableau. Even the council members leaned forward on their floating platforms, trying to understand the human's strategy. Gron circled Jack cautiously, clearly suspecting some kind of trap. "You surrender, then?" "Nope," Jack replied, straightening up. "I'm just changing the game." "There is no changing the game," Gron snarled. "The rules are set by the council." "Actually," Jack said, his breathing steadying, "the rules say you have to touch me before I reach sanctuary. They don't say I have to run." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jack noticed Kella's slight nod from the observation platform. "What trickery is this?" Gron demanded, his massive form tensed like a coiled spring. "No trick. Just a proposition." Jack gestured to their surroundings. "Everyone's watching. The entire Galactic Council, all these spectators. What glory is there in catching a weak human who's already exhausted?" Gron's eyes narrowed suspiciously. But Jack continued, "What if instead of chasing me down like a predator after wounded prey, you defeated me in a test of honor? Something that would truly showcase Voraxian superiority?" "Speak plainly, human," Gron growled, though Jack could see interest flickering in those reptilian eyes. "A contest of strength. Right here. If you win, I forfeit. If I win, you let me reach sanctuary unimpeded." Laughter erupted from Gron's throat. "You? Against me in a trial of strength? Perhaps your oxygen-deprived brain has finally failed." "Not raw power," Jack clarified quickly. "Endurance. The true measure of a warrior's strength." Jack dropped to the floor in a push-up position. "A simple test. Last one to give up wins." The crowd fell silent again, then erupted in a mixture of cheers and confused chattering. Jack saw Grand Marshal Craxex conferring urgently with other officials, but no one intervened. There was nothing in the rules against this, after all. Gron stared at Jack for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed. "Very well. When you collapse from exhaustion, I will simply touch your pathetic form and claim victory." The Voraxian dropped into position beside Jack, his massive arms flexing as he balanced his weight. "Again!" Gron roared, immediately executing perfect push-ups at an alarming rate. Jack matched his pace, keeping his form tight. He hadn't been entirely truthful. This wasn't about endurance exactly. It was about physics, leverage, and alien physiology concepts Nix had helped him understand during their preparation. For the first 2 minutes, they matched each other push for push. The crowd began counting in a rhythmic chant. Jack maintained steady breathing while watching Gron from the corner of his eye. The Voraxian's powerful chest and arms seemed tireless, but something else was happening. By the 4th minute, sweat poured down Jack's face, his arms trembling. But Gron was slowing too. The Voraxian's massive muscle mass, perfect for explosive strength and speed, required tremendous oxygen and energy to sustain repetitive motion. His breathing had become labored, his movements less fluid. "Getting tired?" Jack gasped. Gron snarled in response. But Jack could see it was working. Voraxians evolved for hunting sprint and strike predators, not endurance athletes. Their dense musculature, while impressive, became a liability in sustained exertion. By minute 7, both were struggling. Jack's arms felt like jelly, but Gron's movements had become jerky, his breathing ragged. The mighty warrior's face had darkened to a deep purple as his circulatory system strained. "You cannot defeat me," Gron wheezed between push-ups. Jack didn't waste breath responding. He focused on form, on breathing, on the decades of human evolution that had optimized his body for sustained effort rather than raw power. At minute 10, Gron collapsed. The massive Voraxian lay panting on the floor, muscles quivering with exhaustion, while Jack completed one final push-up before rising shakily to his feet. Stunned silence filled the corridor, followed by a deafening roar of astonishment. "The human won?" Someone gasped. Jack extended a hand toward his fallen opponent. After a moment's hesitation, Gron grasped it, allowing Jack to help him to a sitting position, a symbolic gesture that wasn't lost on the watching crowd. "A clever strategy, human," Gron admitted, his voice rough with fatigue. "You have earned your victory." Jack nodded respectfully. "Your strength is legendary, Champion Gron. As promised, I'll continue to the sanctuary point." As Jack jogged away, considerably more slowly than before, he heard Gron's voice boom out behind him, "Let him pass. The human has proven his worth." The rest of the journey was almost ceremonial. Jack maintained a steady pace, spectators parting before him with newfound respect in their eyes. When he finally stepped onto the glowing blue sanctuary platform, the station erupted in cheers. "The human representative has completed the challenge of worth," the High Arbiter announced, floating down to the sanctuary platform, where Jack stood, still catching his breath. "The Council recognizes this completion as validation of humanity's petition." The observation platforms descended, Council members gathering around. Jack spotted Kella's satisfied smile, Nix's subtle nod of acknowledgement, and Zeal practically vibrating with excitement. "I must admit," Grand Marshal Crack said grudgingly, "your species demonstrates unexpected qualities." "That's kind of our thing," Jack replied with a tired smile. "Being unexpected." The High Arbiter raised their crystalline appendages for silence. "The petition for humanity's inclusion in interstellar trade routes will be ratified immediately. Further, in recognition of the innovative approach demonstrated today, the Council proposes establishing a human advisory committee on adaptive problem solving." Murmurs of approval spread through the gathered officials. Jack caught Kella's eye, and she winked. "There is, however, one final formality," the Arbiter continued. "Champion Gron must formally acknowledge your completion of the challenge." As if on cue, the crowd parted to allow the Voraxian champion through. He had recovered his composure, though Jack noticed his movements were still slightly stiff. Gron approached with deliberate steps, towering over Jack once more. For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then Gron extended his massive hand. "You fought with honor, Jack Harmon of Earth," he rumbled. "Not with claws or teeth or brute strength, but with the weapons of your species' ingenuity and adaptation." Jack clasped the offered hand. "Your strength and skill are everything the stories claim, Champion Gron." The Voraxian's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Perhaps one day I will visit your world. I am curious about these marathons Councilor Kella has been explaining to me." Later, at the formal ratification ceremony, Jack found himself surrounded by curious council members eager to learn more about humanity. Zeal couldn't contain their excitement. "This changes everything. Humanity will bring such fresh perspectives to our interstellar community. An interesting trade goods, Nix added pragmatically. Your world's biodiversity alone holds tremendous value. Kella approached with 2 glasses of something iridescent. Not bad for a backward species. Mem? Jack accepted the drink. I couldn't have done it without your hint about Voraxian physiology. I merely provided information, she replied. You created the solution. That's what impressed them most, not that you completed the challenge, but how you did it. By not playing by their rules. By understanding that sometimes the rules allow for more than one path to victory. Kella raised her glass. To humanity's first step into the wider galaxy. As they clinked glasses, Jack caught sight of Grand Marshal Crax X deep in conversation with Gron. Both looked in his direction occasionally. Should I be worried? Jack asked. Kella laughed. Quite the opposite. They're discussing a cultural exchange program. It seems your approach to the challenge has inspired some Voraxians to reconsider their traditional combat methods. Jack shook his head in amazement. So one small step for a man. One giant leap for human galactic relations, Kella finished. And believe me, Jack Harmon of Earth, this is just the beginning.